All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. My name is Deven Morgan, Director of the Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and this is a Driveline Academy podcast trying to abbreviate my gigantic protracted introduction. I'm sure that by episode 50, I'm just gonna send it, but I feel like we're still at the beginning of this thing.
I'd like to know if you can do it faster than you just did it.
Ooh, that's tough. I might see if I have a future career opportunity at the Mecum Car Auto Options. Joining me as per usual is Driveline Academy coordinator Jeremy Techniel. Good morning. Good afternoon, I guess. We've had a long day of meetings. We've had a long day of meetings already, and we're just going to ship it on a podcast because, hey, man, it takes what it takes.
It takes what it takes.
Relative to the ecosystem of youth baseball, Little League World Series is going on, which is always hilarious. And I think it actually works as a decent on-the-fly run-in to our topic du jour today, which is this idea of how do you apply this idea of skills of scale in competition?
Yeah.
Because when I watched the Little League World Series this year, it just kind of confirms everything that I believe to be true about the environment of youth baseball, which is you have your genetic outliers. You have kids that are above the skill curve and kids that are behind the skill curve. And I think the whole, the genesis of this idea about skills of scale was just what do we know about athletes at this age? They're incredibly sensitive to the environment and to the stimulus that they're presented with. So when I'm watching Little League World Series games and you see a kid on the bump who, not a biological outlier, but a kid who is, closer to average than anything else, but they appear to be kind of behind the curve on skill, it just, to me, it represents a failure of opportunity because there's no reason that kid shouldn't be able to not wear those deficiencies, right? But there is, because if you don't measure the things that matter, right, and you just look at little Tommy, little Jane, and they're very accurate as a pitcher in your local league, and you don't have hitters to kind of test you and stress test that stuff, that just plays. It just plays. So you don't have any reason to not believe that kid isn't on a path for success specific to your current environment right now, which is relative to 12 and under kids and 12 and under field size.
Yeah. This is why it's such a big story, I feel like, whenever a kid makes it to the major leagues, who they can pull up a picture of when he was in the Little League World Series.
In your head,
most of those kids should be at least getting to a high enough level where they have a chance to do that. But if you're not training the skill, all you have is kids that are biological outliers beating their competition at that age. And then a lot of the answer to why are not every one of these kids in the big leagues is because a bunch of them probably quit by the time they're 15, because they're no longer a biological outlier and they never train the skill.
And if the stratification path is not based on skill, but it's just based on you erode this base of your pyramid of the non-biological outliers. Right. Your stratification of the game is just purely based on this luck of the draw genetics. When again, the core argument is that kids are just supremely adaptable in this period of time, right? Everybody doesn't have access to elite genetics. That's just a fundamental thing. Dean Jackson had a thread on Twitter. Shout out to my man Deanimus. We roomed together at ABCA. I love Dean. Dean had this thread the other day about this problem.
Had some replies to it,
and he did, right? This idea of we want to tell ourselves that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard,
right?
And again, I'm gonna stay in my own lane. Okay, I'm not talking about 18U and up. I'm talking about 18U on down. I think to a degree, if you apply this idea of skills of scale broadly, what you would see is that analogy becomes more true, right? Because the approach to skill development in a period of time when kids are highly sensitive to stimulus flattens out some of those disparities in genetics. I will grant that there's a different world of things at 19U on up. That, and I'm fine with that, because again, for us, this idea about applying skills of scale is not about future-proofing an MLB opportunity. It's like Casey Weathers 101, hard work gives you honesty. And you basically You get the most out of this game as possible. You open up as many doors as possible as you can because these things are gated by skill. Jeremy and I had a long conversation this morning already about like communicating to parents this idea of like why it's not important to showcase at 11. And again, I think we made the same point last week. The best coaches in this game are not looking at these kids, and if they are looking at them prepubescently or early high school years, it is solely because of skill.
Yeah.
Solely because of outlier skill.
Yeah.
So if you are not an 11-year-old that hits balls 80 miles an hour or better, not with a USSSA bat, but you still don't need to
I was going to say, call me radical, but like if your age is 11, there's just no need to showcase.
Yeah, thank you. I was
Like,
trying to talk myself into it, but I couldn't.
There really just is no need. It like we can treat it like a roller coaster, right? Where like if you're not instead of if you're not tall enough, if you don't weigh this much, if you don't throw it this hard and hit it this hard, don't waste your money going to it. And like honestly, wouldn't be a thing if they weren't so damn expensive. And like we're talking about spending time and resources doing that because that's the signal you're given that like, well, if you don't do that, like you're just not going to get seen.
Yep.
When in reality, like that is just wasting a bunch of time and resources because like nobody's going to see you there anyways if you're 11. And like we can remove 11-year-old from the example because like I think a lot of people probably know that 11 is a wild time to showcase.
That's
a kid.
preposterous. Don't do that.
Don't do that. But 17 you kid, 16 you kid.
Sure.
Wanted to go to a showcase. My guy, you weigh 140 pounds. That showcase isn't going to do anything for you. Like there are better ways. Instead of spending all your money on going to the showcase this weekend and a bunch of time driving to the showcase, going to the performing in the showcase, whatever. Come here, get in the gym.
Unless you are an outlier in terms of skill.
Right.
Like the Padres signed a kid this year, 17 years old, out of China, who throws 88 miles an hour. If you weigh a buck 40 and you aren't an outlier at skill,
if you're good enough, they'll find you.
Right, 100%.
And a not bad rule of thumb for parents is like, if you have to pay for a showcase, don't go. If you get invited to a showcase, that is when you should go because they want your kid there to get seen. If you are paying to go to a showcase, in the vast majority of situations, you are subsidizing their ability to show a better player. Sure. And like that's it. Unfortunately, it's not like said enough because like, these are big money making opportunities for people, but that's just like the reality of the situation is that like these showcases are not there for the vast majority of kids that are on that field.
Yeah.
And those kids are there to subsidize it for the kids that are there to draw the scouts, which are generally, there's like 5 of them at a showcase, maybe 10. And it's up to like us as coaches and as people who run like an academy to help them understand that.
Yeah.
That like we can get you showcased. Your skills, when they reach a certain level, they're going to get showcased. I promise you. They're going to get showcased. People are going to come and watch if you're good. And we went down to Portland for that tournament, and we had a kid who throws it with some velocity. Mm-hmm. When he came in the game, nobody was watching that game. Like, the parents of the kids who were playing the game were watching that game. Within 5 pitches, you had 2 to 3 teams that were, like, waiting to play the next game in that tournament, and their coaches and their parents all lined up at the fence watching this kid throw velocity. Because that is what happens when you get a kid that's really good, people see them. Yeah. And like that's just the landscape of things, that's how it works. If your skills are good enough, they will get showcased. If you are trying to showcase skills that aren't good enough, it's a waste of your time and resources. Yeah. And like that's the reality of the situation, unfortunately, for most kids are not good enough at when they go to a showcase to showcase their skills.
Yeah. So if we understand that about like the importance of like skill relative to the stage of development biologically of our players in our market, right? I think it makes sense to kind of segue into the next thing, which is this idea of how you apply the skills at scale concept within competition.
Yeah.
Right. It's tough. And I have said publicly, I don't give a shit about the win-loss record of our 12 and under teams. And that's true in my heart. But there's also, I think, a desire for me as both a parent and an administrator and a coach that I want to see it resolve in wins. So it's not, I think sometimes when I say I don't care about winning for these younger age groups, that I think that I think this trailing perception that it's not a thing that I would prefer or that we push towards. And that's not the case. So I think it's good to kind of talk about this on a podcast because you actually have the ability to get into some of the nuance,
to add,
right?
add nuance to the conversation.
And it's like, so yes, I can say, and I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I can say I don't care about winning at 12U, but I can say that I care about it desperately just because I want the kids to feel competitive. Because, and this is again something we just talked about, this morning in our department meeting, at a base cognitive level, these kids, high highs, low lows.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, they're very sensitive to, I think, anything that disturbs their internal perception that like the thing that they want is real, and it's like it's real for them, and so like, we applaud big leaguers that like work through adversity. There's a post working its way around baseball Twitter today about oh my gosh, the name just like Billy Wagner.
Oh yeah.
For the Mets, right? D3 guy.
I think so. Small.
Yeah, small, threw very, very, very slow in high school, and got a shot and continued to develop skill, and obviously made his mark in the show, right? At the highest level of competition and consequence. Great. Think about that journey for Billy Wagner. Okay, Billy Wagner gets to the point where he's playing high school baseball. Is probably reasonably competitive. I'm just kind of making a projection based on what I understand. Reasonably competitive, but obviously not attracting interest of D1 schools and professional organizations, right? So he's a high school ball player, and there's how many million of those kids every year?
Lots of millions.
So Billy Wagner will not be deterred from his dream. I think we talked about this last year, right? Like we love this story of just like someone's competitiveness and willing to do what it takes to get what they want, and it opens up this door for them to do cool stuff.
Much more relatable.
Yeah, right.
And man, Mike Trout is large.
Right, yeah. Right. Yeah, Mike Trout's neck is bigger than both of my thighs wrapped together.
Yeah.
So we love that story, right? And I love this idea of Billy Wagner as like a 17, 18-year-old person persevering through that journey and getting to where he wanted to go. The base problem you have to negotiate around for kids that are like, I don't know, like 10 to 13, even 10 to 14, is that I think the conviction with which they have the attachment to that dream is a little bit more flimsy. It's a little permeable. Mm-hmm. Right. And when you have that adversity, you have that loss, I think if those things stack up disproportionately to their sense of progress, then that dream can die. Like it doesn't, it doesn't have unlimited oxygen. So the trick about, I kind of think, executing this idea of like competitiveness through a lens of skills at scale is like, number one, the two things are just, it's all kit and caboodle together. Right.
It should be. It isn't always.
It should be. Yeah. But what we're pushing for, like internally to the academy, is that thing, right? It's just like, look, our winning percentage in year one of our program was not good.
Yeah.
Our winning per percentage in our program last year was still not great. The goal, and I mean, we're gonna have to talk about whether we actually set this up as a KPI or not. Key performance indicator. You measure the stuff that matters. You communicate that to your people.
The more you know.
Right. Whether we set up a KPI for like our winning percentage or not, it is something that we are kind of communicating to our coaches and just going like, look, internal. There's some of this stuff is just internal to our own academy, right? So I want to kind of gloss over that stuff, but I do believe that there is some fidelity outside of our four walls to talk to coaches and moms and dads about this idea of like, look, you can pursue competitiveness through a skills to scale lens.
Right.
It is approaching competition, knowing the stuff that matters to us, and encouraging the kids along the way as they like scratch that learning out.
Right.
And I think there's that path, but it also is kind of the thing that runs parallel to that, which is all the shit that you're committing to not do, because it takes away at the development of that thing. And like, I don't think I've told this story on this podcast, so I'll recycle this one because I'm a man of very limited ideas. So COVID, March 20 or like March of 20 is when things shut down. I mean, my family, we went down to Arizona spring training, saw my brother Berticus, Rob Hill with the Dodgers. I saw Kyle and Casey Weathers with the Reds. Big Casey Weathers fanboy. So like, cause I wasn't here on the floor when Casey trained. So I got a chance to like talk to him. It was tight. We came back, my kids had like a day and a half of school, and it was like, hey, everybody come home.
Yeah.
So at the time, going into that year, we didn't have academy, and my son was playing for another organization. And I think that organization, like a lot of others, was kind of put in this weird place where if you don't have facility access, and kind of like the thing that is the deliverable for you, for your experience of being on that team is games, and you can't do that thing either, and it's hard to get on fields because like a lot of the fields around here were locked down. It puts you in a tough spot about just like what you're delivering to your customer.
Right.
So they were, his team was kind of stuck in that box for a bit. His head coach, I think, did the best job possible to kind of keep the kids engaged in that period of time, but it was a challenge for all of us to navigate. So leading into the summer, there was like, I think it was like in June or July. I think it was June. It was either May or June. Like there was this period of time where in certain areas where we are here in Washington, there were some counties that opened back up. Because like the financial industry of youth baseball around here was like desperate to play games. Also, it was like, all right, well, cool. Well, everybody's going to go drive for, however many hours away to go get this game. Right. So, I took the day off work on here on Friday because we had games starting on Friday midday. My son and I drove down, and our first game, his team got matched up against a larger organization in our local area. So we've been locked down from like March through, May. I think this was June or whatever, right? So the kids, really, a lot of them hadn't done anything in 3 months. Around here, the weather is so bad, you typically don't even get a chance to play until like late February at best. I think they had that, they played in an indoor series of games around here. It's
Tight.
whatever. Yeah, sure. Point being that these kids have been on the shelf for 3-4 months.
Yeah.
So top of one. My son's team is in the field. The opposing team, they're up to bat first. And I'm just a parent. I don't coach for this team. I'm just watching from the stands, but I watch coaches, I watch coaches on the other team, and I'm watching the coach, whole bunch of signs, and the kid very obviously first pitch take. I watch the coach, same signs, second pitch take. I watch the coach, 5-pitch walk or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. These kids have been on the shelf for like months, and this coach is going like, hey, I just understand the game theory optimal approach to what I'm trying to do here. Mm-hmm. I really don't care about skills at scale, so I'm not sensitive to punting on opportunities to like learn and develop. And the game theory optimal is like, look, man, if I just go first pitch walk or first batter walk, and I give this kid, take sign until I get that job, and I don't let that kid get the bat off his shoulders, a walk is a triple, right? Because there are going to be some pass balls.
Probably a homer.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it really, so when I say that like this idea of like the skills of skill approach to competition is both embracing some of these opportunities in the way that you kind of build skill in training and then apply it in competition, trailing with that in parallel is a rejection of what is, I think, almost the game theory optimal approach to winning games on a small field.
Yes.
And I think it makes sense for me to go like, hey, that is a foolish way to approach youth baseball. But if you are a mom or a dad that doesn't have access to all the information, the fidelity of information that we have, right? if you want to play high school baseball, you need to be this presentation in terms of your measurables. Just like full stop. Like you just, if you're going to be a competitive high school baseball player as a freshman, you should probably throw the ball, I don't know, let's say 66 miles an hour or better. And that's probably on the low side.
Actually, that seems low to me, but yes.
I mean, that's like scraping by to make, make a freshman team.
Yep.
If you want to be competitive, you probably need to throw the ball, 70 to 75, honestly,
Yep.
right? You need to have exit velocity of, I'm going to say at least max 80, top eighth, if that's a thing that you have access to measuring, is probably mid sevens,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But we have that information to confirm that.
Right.
If you're a mom or a dad that doesn't have access to that information and you don't understand that like this is just a necessity, if you do your job and you want to keep the kid playing in the game, and I'm going like, hey, look, don't give that kid the take sign.
Right.
Let that kid get off a swing because you need to learn that. It makes sense that message doesn't resonate because we're not speaking the same language.
Well, and this is where like you need to have like the nuance of this conversation is you can see it from the other perspective as well, right? Like we obviously focus on the skills that scale here. We aren't focusing on the skills that scale because when they turn 15 or 18 or whatever it is, there's this worldwide bat speed competition that we want them to compete in.
Right.
Like we're doing this so that they can be better baseball players.
Right.
And then they can go out there and compete and win baseball games.
Yep.
Right. That is the end goal here of like being able to compete on a baseball field. And that is why we're developing these skills.
Yeah.
But if we don't make sure they know that, and if it's much more of we just want you to swing the bat fast and don't worry about the results, which is 100% true, that the message can get lost that competing is also important.
Yep.
And that it's not, that baseball isn't just in how fast you swing it and how fast you throw it. And like, yes, there are they are gated by those skills. The game is gated by those skills. You need to at least have a certain threshold of those skills to even play at a certain level. But if you don't also know how to go out there and compete, we have failed you.
Yeah.
As an organization, because they're the same thing.
Yeah.
You need both.
Yeah.
You need both to be able to like play and enjoy playing baseball at a very high level. We saw it with some of our like developmental teams this year where we got them way better at swinging the bat fast and throwing the ball hard. And they didn't necessarily win a whole lot of baseball games because those skills didn't translate to them like competing necessarily on a baseball field. And I think in a lot of ways, the competing aspect is just attitude.
Oh, 100%.
And that's a thing that you can set in an environment that every day they come to practice, this is the attitude that we're going to have. The attitude isn't, I don't care, I just want you to PR today or like swing the bat as fast as you can, which like that is the signal we're sending. But the attitude behind that is, well, this is why.
Yeah.
I'm not just asking you to swing the bat fast because I like watching a bat move fast.
Yeah.
Although I do. Yeah. I'm asking you to swing the bat fast because I know it's going to lead to you hitting the ball harder and finding a spot in a high school team and being able to compete at a high level, because that is why we play the game of baseball.
Yeah.
To compete, to go out there and compete.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. There's just so much nuance to like the levels of kind of how you understand that concept and application, and it's difficult. I think it's difficult to understand for parents and coaches sometimes because we're so far removed from our own competitive playing time, right? We, most people aren't embedded in like most baseball coaches do it on the side, it's just like, and most of them are parents. So if you're not confronted with just like the stark reality, which is you need to have this skill presentation to just actually be in consideration for some of these opportunities, you should go up the chain. If you're not confronted by that stark reality, and then you see Barry Bonds, this is another thing I saw floating around this morning. Barry Bonds is explaining how the pitcher supplied him the power. You have that guy sending that signal out to a marketplace that suffers, again, this flaw. Most of us didn't play high-level baseball. Most of us didn't scout. and we're not confronted by this stark reality on a daily basis. If Barry Bonds tells me that, like, well, he just let the pitcher supply the power, most of us aren't, number one, we just kind of take that at face value. We don't know who Dr. Alan Nathan is. Shout out to Dr. Alan Nathan.
University of Illinois.
Hum babe. And you just kind of like, I mean, that's an expert in the field.
Yeah.
I'm never going to have the level of expertise that Barry Bonds is going to have in terms of like practical application. Probably. What I do have, however, is like facts and physics, man.
Yeah.
1 mile an hour bat speed is going to produce 1.2 miles an hour of exit velocity. Pitch speed contributes 0.2 miles an hour of exit velocity. There's a mile an hour difference. So when the guy who is probably like one of the poster childs for just like ludicrous bat speed, whether influenced by products on the secondary market or not, like pull up video of the Barry Bonds Eric Gagne AB, right?
Oh man.
Pull that up, and then pull up Babe Ruth. I mean, because you can see some stuff like some decent like in-game footage of Babe Ruth. There's easily like a 10 mile an hour bat speed difference between the two of them. Easily, if not 20.
Yeah.
Like honestly.
Yeah.
Honestly. Barry Bonds, 80 grade bat speed, 85. I mean, like, just like top of the food chain.
Right.
But when that guy who is an expert in application says that, oh, the pitcher supplied the power, this is very similar to like Frank Thomas going like, well, I never swung more than 70%.
But see,
Frank Thomas can do that.
I was just going to say, this is a situation where, like, Barry Bonds grew up in Major League dugouts. Willie Mays was his godfather. Like, he didn't need to have the correct information necessarily to get really good at playing baseball.
Right.
There are a lot of people that can't explain why they're good at things. Like, there's plenty of clips of, like, people telling you to swing down on the ball, and then you watch them swinging, and they are not swinging down on the ball. And, like, they think they are.
Sure.
Because, like, that is just what's in their head, but then they don't do that, and they don't need to go watch themselves on video.
Right.
They don't need to go figure that out because they had a long career, and they were successful doing it one way. And, like, this is what was parroted to them. And regardless of what they actually did,
right,
they're going to parrot that to the next people. And, I'm a firm believer in giving a lot more time to skill development than gameplay, especially at like a younger age, right? Like we talk about that a lot. That being said, in gameplay, what you get, especially if you don't have skill development, is consistent reps to figure out some of the other things,
right?
The consistent reps.
Right.
So like there is a player that is in our academy that was, we like talking about the team that your child is on and the team that I coach, but who threw the ball hard and swung the bat fast and didn't make a whole lot of contact and hit more batters probably than he did the strike zone. He played juniors this year, got a lot of reps, and figured it out through reps.
Right.
He figured out how to hone the skills he had through reps. And like he shouldn't be forced to have to do that. And especially when we're running a program that is intentionally giving them less gameplay reps because that's not what we know to be important.
Yeah.
We have to do a very solid job of honing those skills in our training environment. And you can't do that without like a competitive attitude.
Yeah.
That has to happen in here. Otherwise, the old method of like, well, we're just going to get you a million reps until like you figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
And like, this is the same thing like 25 years ago when someone wanted to learn a new pitch. Like it was an off-season thing. You had to take like 3 months to learn a new pitch because you had to throw a bunch of bullpens with it. You had to figure out how to throw it, how to get more movement on it, how to throw strikes with it eventually. Our man Shohei pulled out a two-seamer in his last outing
recently.
It was all over baseball Twitter.
Yeah.
He developed it mid-season, right? Like that's not a thing that he started the year throwing because with technology and with a good training environment, you can train that without actually having to need gameplay reps to be able to train skills like that anymore.
Yeah. Whoever's coaching that Shohei guy, they're doing a pretty good job.
They're doing a pretty good job. But that's the that's why you need like both of those things is because at one end of the spectrum, the reason that it has worked for some people is because yes, eventually enough reps will iron out a lot of those issues, and like just being competitive, depending on your personality, will iron out those issues.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a personality where like you're not gonna get up off the mat after you've been knocked down, that environment is not good for you.
Right.
Where we're just gonna give you consistent reps at the same thing in the middle of games where you're failing publicly.
Right.
And hoping that you get it figured out. That's why kids will quit.
Yep.
But on the other end of the spectrum, if we have kids that we're not giving them that competitive attitude in a training environment, all we're doing is developing kids who move the bat fast, and all we're doing is developing kids who move well.
Yes.
And not like competitors on the baseball field. So like both things have to be there, and the competitive part is so much easier than the skill development part because it just takes an attitude.
Yeah.
Whereas the skill development part, that takes either a ton of reps or like a very intentional program to develop that skill.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, like, if I remember correctly, on the soccer side, they talk about this kind of idea of like the movement and then the application is like the difference between skill and technique.
Yeah.
So like bat speed is a skill, hitting balls hard is a technique. Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that like I think this thing that we're talking about is just like developing this competitive attitude and having that competitive attitude be like the lens through which you apply skills and turn skill into technique. I think one of the ways you kind of solve for that is kind of like erasing some of the lines around what is a game and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because and again, like a lot of this just comes back to intention. You know, like it just comes back to intention. Like intention setting is so flippin' important because it gives you the opportunity to have the intention mapped to application in game, right? Like I just did, this thread this week on Twitter about hitting plyos.
Yeah.
And the whole fucking point, we're just going to kind of.
I was going to say, you went from flip. You censored yourself with flipping, and then you went back right to it.
It's been a long day.
That's all right.
It's been a long day.
It has been.
The whole point of like hitting plyos as a tool in training is that there's direct application between what we need to do in game and a thing that you can model in training. You have to hit the ball flush.
Yep.
Part of having to hit the ball flush means getting your barrel at a place where it is on time and on plane.
Yep.
That is what good hitting is. Point blank, period. If you don't have those, like, if those three things of bat speed, on time, and on plane, you're just hope.
Yes.
Like, hope is your strategy, and that ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
So the idea about being super intentional in training and leveraging both technology and tools that allow you to like really have the fidelity there between what you're doing in training and what you do in competition be one-to-one is that everything is a game.
Yep.
You're constantly competing.
Yep.
And it's, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about like the customer sales deck that we gave to our Academy families this year, specified like for each age range, number of games we're trying to deliver. Part of me would prefer next year to not say a single thing about that.
I mean, we did leave it pretty open with like games / scrimmages / inter squad.
Sure.
So those are environments that we can control a little bit more than like just tournament games or things like that. But I mean, it also, we practiced last week. We were working with, actually it might have been Tuesday of this week. Things blend together.
Yeah.
We're working with short bat, long bat.
Oh,
and they each did a round of flips. Kyle Houts, shout out Houts. Hitting trainer working with the kids, stops them after the first round and calls them all in. And spent 5 to 10 minutes asking them questions. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of using a long bat? What's the purpose of using a short bat? Because if they don't know the answer to that question, what's the point of doing it at all?
Yep.
And like if they don't know why they're using it and what it's supposed to look like. So the thing there with him was everything is supposed to go dead center because the short bat helps you with your posture.
Yep.
And the long bat helps you with your bat
Stay
speed because it's a little
connected
harder and
in
stay
turn,
connected. Everything should stay up the middle. And a lot of these kids, because this is another thing that we tell them, is like pulling the ball in the air is very good.
Which it is.
Which it is. It is. Lots of evidence. So they're all trying to pull the ball in the air with the short bat and the long bat, when that shouldn't be your intention with a short bat and a long bat. The intention of the short bat and the long bat is to keep everything up the middle because it trains your bat to be able to hit all different types of pitches and it trains your posture. So he had to stop practice and explain that to them for 5 to 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Ask them questions, figure out that they didn't know why they were using these bats and what it was supposed to look like, then explain it to them. And then we did the round all over again, and man, it was so much better. So like, I know the big thing is like quality over quantity and like 100% there, but in a lot of cases, and like we're guilty of this, our expectations for kids are lower. And there are things that we may not explain to them because like, they might not understand why or like, and it's okay that they don't understand why. But we should have the expectation that they will. And that like we can explain that to them at least in a way that makes sense to them. We don't have to explain the science behind, like I'm not going to pull out The Science of Hitting by Ted Williams, great book, and show the kid the diagrams of why it's so important to be on plane. But like you can pretty easily explain to a kid why it's important to be on plane and why bat speed helps you if you're not on time.
Yep.
Like those are things that like are easy to explain without having to get into like the nitty gritty that like, you know we can answer those nitty gritty questions, but we don't need to. It's I almost liken it to like a math teacher, right? Like you have to like, it's better to explain to them why than to just like give them the equation and have them memorize it. And it'll stick with them way better of understanding like what the concept is and why they're using that equation, as opposed to like just memorizing the equation itself and knowing where to plug in numbers.
Yeah.
And like, I think it can be very difficult, especially when you're training with so much technology. I think what I should say is I think it can be very easy when you're training with so much technology to lose that.
Yeah.
And like really lose the intention and just like the tools are doing what they're doing. Yeah. But like it has to be explained to the player, and that attitude in that environment has to be set properly before they even start swinging. Otherwise, it's just going to be like a wasted round of reps.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing that you can do. I mean, it's the again like the Twitter thread. It's just like the ultimate sophistication is simplicity.
Yeah.
And if you hold that concept dear at the top, then it's just like a very simple line that goes like, all right, what's the big paradigm that we're moving towards?
Yep.
Okay, what's the most simplified way that I can deliver that idea and intention to the athletes? How is the environment cultivating and providing learning opportunity to develop that skill? Yep. And then when you turn the third step there into the game, which is to say that it's a competition that matters, that's the way that we get a chance to like cultivate this competitive mindset in application of like the top tier paradigm of skill that we're training towards.
Yeah.
And then you muddy the waters about what is actually a game. Well, what we should have is like kids that are competing their tails off in the facility, and then take that exact same mindset into open water competition, and like in some iterative steps along the way, right? About like, okay, and the one thing that this kind of doesn't address is, I think, the development of the skill, which is like baseball IQ, or like learning how to play the game. And like, other than, the Ron Polk book, nobody really has that system about literally how to build that thing from scratch. But if I shout out to my man Ron, the one thing that's missing is just like some measurables, right. And in order to do that, I mean, it's really easy comparatively to assess skill relative to the tools that we have.
Right.
It's a lot more difficult to quantifiably measure the skill of playing shortstop. Right. It's just, there's a lot, it's hard to define what is the specific output, what is the testing criteria, how do you define like competence and excellence and along the way, right? Because it's so open. Mm-hmm. It's very, very open. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Like it 100% doesn't mean it's impossible, but also the more that you essentially like take the same approach, about constantly competing towards what you define as the paradigm, right? What is the paradigm? We want every kid to be able to be a competitive shortstop. Well, let me say competent. Not competitive.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, what does competent mean? It means you need to have good lateral movement. You need to have the ability to start and stop. You need to have perception, and you need to tie those perception to movement solutions, both in terms of like how do you get to the ball, and then also like the mechanics therein of receive, take in and get the ball out. Understanding that, we understand the paradigm, we understand like the attributes that we're trying to work for. Now it's just like, well, what are the games that are going to stress test this stuff?
Yeah,
like it's just all of it kind of comes all the way back down to games at the bottom level. And I think the only thing that we're trying to do that might be a little bit unique is have that definition of the game where we stress test this stuff being outside of the boundaries of just like a tournament weekend, right? There's more ways we can compete in this game system that's designed to develop this top tier paradigm skill. And not being beholden to the tournament environments allows us the ability to kind of do that and muddy the waters about how we stress test this stuff. Which is, I think for me, I think the place that I want us to get to eventually is having more organizations that are in agreement about the approach. Well, I mean, it's really one of two things. It's either growing our own organization to serve that need or finding partner organizations that get it. Because at a certain point, you also like, you can't eat your own food forever. Like you want to go out and you need to stress test your stuff in different environments, right? And the ability to eventually have like an ecosystem that revolves around these type of like ideals is that it ideally prevents that thing of we get on a field and you see a bunch of kids who, again, highly reactive to stimulus, need skill development, which means they need opportunities to develop skill and not have coaches take those opportunities away.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason for wanting to continue to expand this approach is basically just like to spread good around. Like I think at the end of the day, I think this is it's the right way to approach it relative to the opportunity that we have now and the comparatively limited consequence.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to a coach the other day that we were interviewing to hire, and I asked what age they were comfortable working with. And the answer was probably like 13 or under, because 13 is the last time I played baseball. Like, okay, that's interesting. Why was 13 the last time you played baseball? Well, I was like kind of small and I wasn't that good, and I literally was like having a bunt every at bat. Yeah. Like 2 outs, runner on first, you're laying down a bunt. Yeah. Like it was, my coach didn't trust me to make contact, so I was just like bunting all year, and I just didn't like have fun. I didn't want to go back and play.
Super weird.
He didn't, until like I put it in front of him, he didn't even understand why that was bad.
Yeah.
Why his coach had literally ruined his love of the game of playing baseball.
Right.
And taken that competition away from him. Yeah. Because that's the worst thing that we could do as a coach is just like remove them from the competition, because we're like, you're not ready for it. And like because I really want to win this game, and that's all I care about, I'm not going to give you even the chance to get better and to like improve your ability in competition. And like it happens way too often, and we're not those people, right? Like we're very anti-bunt, but like the same thing comes into play where when we lower the amount of games that we play, which is what we want to do, because all research shows that you should, especially at that age, be spending more time on skill development than actual gameplay, it lowers the amount of chances they get to compete in a game. Yep. So if you're not giving them those chances to compete outside of gameplay, they don't get that competition, and they want it. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to find that competition elsewhere, and it is likely going to be at a place that's not going to develop their skill. Yeah. That is just going to give them the competition aspect. So like that's the key, is that you need both of them, right? Like you have to be doing both of them. Otherwise you're not developing players at all on either extreme that you're on. Yeah. You will have I shouldn't say you're not developing players at all. You're not developing all of your players.
Right.
You are focusing a system based on the people that react best to those certain stimuli.
Right.
And that there's a lot of kids that don't respond well to one or don't respond well to the other. I mean, there's lots of different coaching types out there. You have your more like militaristic drill sergeant type of coach, and then you've got the more like easygoing, relaxed style of coach. And different players react better to different coaches. And I, as I'm putting together rosters for our next year, I have heard from parents who had one type of coach last year and don't want that because their kid didn't react well to that, or the vice versa. Yeah. They want to be in that same environment, and they're worried that I don't know who the new coach is this year, so is he going to provide that same environment for my kid?
Because I'm sensitive to like what I think is the way that my kid is going to ideally respond.
Right.
Yeah.
And my answer always is like what we want. We want the coaches that are in here. They're going to get to know the kids and build a relationship with the kids to understand what type of coaching that kid needs best. Yeah. There are some kids on my team that I'm a little bit more drill sergeant-y with, or like, I don't want to use the term militaristic because I don't think I'm militaristic, but like that I'm a little harsher on than other kids because I know that they're going to respond better to that. And then there's other kids that like, I'm not going to say that because I know that they're not going to respond well to that. And my entire goal there is to keep them in the right competitive mindset.
Yep.
Because especially if we're doing this in a game or in some sort of competition, if they feel like I'm not in their corner or I'm not pushing them in the right direction,
oh man,
it's the competitiveness is gone. They don't want to be out there, and like you can just see it happen on a field. You can go to any game at any level and you understand when a team is not competitive. And like there are guys that are out there and they're not competing. And that is like it's a thing that like we can run into a lot more if our focus is on the skill development part.
Yeah.
And like less gameplay. And if we're not very intentional about making sure that competition aspect is there and making sure that they know we want them to compete, and that's what this is all for, that this is training to compete in baseball.
Yeah.
We're not training for training's sake. Like I said, we're not doing this for some world bat speed competition that happens. Like we're doing this to apply those skills to go out and play baseball because you love baseball, you love going out there and competing on a field, and we're trying to equip you with the best skills possible to do that and make you competitive.
Yeah. It's such a like a nuanced thing to go like, what we're trying to do is we want to develop technique in a game that plays in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, you got to go so far down the rabbit hole to really make that clear, because I think at the end of the day, that guy's coach, if you had the opportunity to run into him, probably doesn't think he stigmatized that kid's athletic development. Probably doesn't think that he negatively impacted that kid. Probably based on conversations that I've had with other guys that have had that experience, thinks that he helped that kid succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so it blows my mind, man. Like when back in the day, like when we released like the Never Bunt shirts, because like of course. I every time that topic came up, or we would do those shirts, there would always be somebody in there about like, well, I've got to, you got to teach these kids to, it's selfish. It's selfish to suggest that a kid should not bunt because those kids that are bunting are contributing to the team. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, we're like,
because it's also it's also selfish to have a kid bunt so that you can get a win.
Well,
but
like we're just fundamentally we're not on the same. We don't have an agreement about both the intention of youth baseball and an intention to address an inevitable skill need if these kids continue to play.
Well, this is why I love our stupid game, right? Sure. It is an individual, like the majority of the game is a pitcher-batter matchup. It's a very individual. That's why that's why the numbers love baseball.
Yep.
It's because you can really isolate that individual batter-pitcher matchup. But you're in a team context, right? Yep. This isn't. If you weren't, it would be golf.
Right.
But like it's individual matchups in a team context. You need to be able to have both.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't know if we've mentioned his name on the podcast, but Steve Barron, our incoming 18U head coach.
Shout out, Steve.
One of the great things that we talked about in his interview, which was one of the reasons he got hired, was talking about the switch that flipped for him when he was in the minor leagues. And again, he was a first round pick. He's in the minors. There's skill there, right? Like he has a huge foundation of talent. And he found himself hitting 7, 8, 9 in the batting order. In his mind, his goal was, well, I just got to like hit better. I got to move up in the batting order. I'm here to be a cleanup hitter.
Right.
His career flipped because he was pretty stalled out. He went, I think he repeated a low A or maybe high A. And his career flipped when he realized that there's no shame in being a 7, 8, 9 hitter, and he's here to be a really good teammate and like a catcher that handles a pitching staff.
Yeah.
That was his carrying tool to get there. The bat was good enough to play, but that wasn't why he was there. And like, you can develop skill and also know your role at the same time. Yeah. And like know what your role is as a teammate on a team, but also be selfish and work hard to get better as a person and or as a player, and have your own individual goals, but then also understand that there are team goals. Yeah. That like there are times where I can be selfish and try to make the play. And then there are times when like I got to know where my teammates are at, because if I'm cutting somebody off in the infield because I want to make every play, when it's an easier play for him, I just cost my team an out.
Sure.
And like that's an easy thing to know, of like communication with your teammate. Where are you? Who's got the ball in this situation? Yeah. But if you're trying to make every play and it's an individual thing, you might botch that. Yeah. So that's why I love our stupid game, is because it's the only game that's out there really that you can have an individual based game in a team setting. Yeah. And you need to be able to do both and contribute to both. And we have to be able to train both. We have to be able to train them to be team players. Yeah. Because look, I mean, like we've talked about this, like obviously we don't like bunting. Like we're not shy about the fact we don't like bunting. That being said, we are sending kids off to high school coaches, and we don't have control over what they do. Right. Now, you might go, like one of our kids might be playing high school ball and his coach asks him to bunt, and we are putting that kid in a situation, and I'm not saying that like we should have him bunt more and that's how do you solve this situation, but like he might be looked at as a bad team player by his coach in that situation, or a selfish player because he doesn't know his role on the team. And like that is something that I don't want for these kids. So like both parts have to be there. You have to train it as an individual, and you also have to train it as a team. And like this is what the team needs, and we're all pushing in this direction. And to push in this direction, we need you to do this and hit these goals. Yeah. But if you make it too individual and too isolated, they lose trust in their teammates. And if you don't trust your teammates, you're never going to win again. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and this is part of like, I mean, that specific example on the high school side is one of the difficulties that I think kids have at those ages, starting in 14 for some of the early kids, but really 15, 16s. Yeah. And this is, I mean, I've seen these conversations online a bunch about just like playing high school baseball. Is it really a thing that's necessary? And the tough part is that a lot of times like that experience is defined by the coach's approach to developing you, right? And in the high school season, you're basically going to be locked in that ecosystem for 25% of your year. You want to harness that opportunity to be able to play high school baseball, just I think because largely I think we just still believe that that's a good thing. Yep. In the same way that we believe that like the way that we run our program, we don't ask kids to not play recreational little league baseball or pony or Ripken or whatever. We want kids to play high school baseball, but then because of that, you open up yourself to kind of the square hole round peg of what is that coach that's outside of our ecosystem? What's their paradigm? Right. Like what are they trying to do? But I still think, at the end of the day, my hope is that if we continue to kind of iterate and develop our program the way that we are, we can continue to develop like the skill and application therein, right? Skill and technique. Is that it is just fundamentally an easier problem for a good high school baseball coach to solve if day one of practice that kid has at or above normative values for skill.
He's probably not asking you to bunt.
I mean that's
Depends on the coach, of course.
That's the
but
thing.
like, yeah.
And even if they are, that again, a good high school baseball coach understands that it's just simply an easier thing to approach. It's an easier thing to train competency in bunting than it is to develop motor output and application when it comes to either throwing ball velocity or bat speed and application and like hitting the ball hard. It's just simply an easier thing to do.
Yes.
It's. I don't want to set a kid up for failure, but I also I can't have our program be defined by the paradigm of a high school coach that isn't sensitive to where this kid's long-term plan is.
Right.
Because some of them just are not, and that's not an attack on high school coaches. That's just coaching, period. Right? Coaching, period. Because the same thing with that coach and his 13U coach, stigmatizing that kid, making him bunt all the time. That coach didn't infer that they're doing anything wrong. Right. A high school coach that like looks at a kid and is kind of making that same conclusion is going, well, what do I need to do to keep my job? Like full stop. Right.
Yep.
Well, I need to have a competitive record.
Right.
And if that coach either doesn't have the horses to think that they can like achieve that, or they don't realize that just like most of the time, if you have a limited number of outs, you shouldn't give them up. And like generally just hitting the ball hard is a good thing. It opens up the door for better opportunities. If that coach doesn't understand that message, then of course they're going to have that kid bunt, right? Like it's just, and it's tough. That part of it is probably a little beyond the scope of this conversation because it's just not a thing that we can solve for. But, but at the end of the day, I think that like this idea of just like applying skills to scale in competition, it just boils down to the fact that they are called skills to scale for a reason.
Yes.
The reason that we came up with that name or that I named that thing is because these are the skills that have the most impact on your long-term competitiveness in the game. Full fucking stop.
And I'd much rather be in a position where we're really good at training the skills that scale and maybe had less than we wanted competitive attitude, because that is so much easier to figure out and like change than building a true program to build the skills that scale.
Yeah.
Because like that's a lot of work. There's a lot goes into being able to build a program and run a program and execute a program.
Yes.
Focus on the skills that scale and measure all of those things. It is much easier to just change the attitude of a practice and make it more competitive and like get the competitive juices flowing for these kids. That's just like a way easier problem to solve.
Yeah.
So if like I had a choice between those two problems, because like, it's the balance of the two of them. But if I had a choice, like obviously I would so much rather have the issue of like, okay, we need to be we need to have a more competitive attitude in practices.
Yep.
Because the kids are just going out there swinging the bat really fast and like not necessarily understanding that there needs to be intention to how to apply that skill in a game.
Yeah.
And like that part's much easier to explain than the actual like, let's get you swinging the bat faster.
Yep.
Once you're swinging the bat faster, it's not that hard to apply that skill, or it's less hard to apply that skill to gameplay.
Yeah.
The hard part is building that skill in the first place.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the crux of the problem with youth baseball, right? Like not enough people are building the skill and way too many people are just forcing the competitive attitude out there without building the skill. And like that works way worse than doing it the other way.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's even, I think, difficult for us to, kind of talk to people that are on the other side of the proverbial aisle when it comes to like this approach, because we're just not measuring the same things.
Right.
We're not like fundamentally speaking the same language. So, I think I get excited all the time about like where we're taking this program as we kind of develop this idea, because because we're cognizant of our failures, right? We're cognizant of the things we know that we need to improve because you're exactly right. The International Bat Speed Federation World Championship, there's no date set,
Right.
right? There's no prize money. There's no rankings. I'd kind of be, anyways.
Something we should create.
Yeah.
No.
International Bat Speed Federation. Because that isn't a thing, our approach to iterating our program relative to being mindful of competitiveness and being mindful of cultivating a competitive attitude and like not only developing skill but also developing technique is because what we want to see is the ultimate application of this idea,
Right.
which is winning our way.
Yep.
Like it is. And I think it's, I mean, this is something you and I have talked about. I think it's just likely that like the ultimate expression of that idea is not going to happen for some years.
Yeah.
Because we by and large did not start this program with a lot of biological outliers. We're starting to attract some weirdly enough.
Not that weird.
As we continue to do this thing, but honestly, the kids are going to have the most cumulative effect of the system, right? Of the system of developing skill and technique and competitiveness. The kids are going to have the maximum effect of that, or the kids that are in the system for the longest.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because like so we just finished like tryout season or whatever, and on one of our tryouts we had one of our younger players who's going to be on an 11U this year. His mom had his younger sister trying out, and she's only 8. She's a young kid, but like, I mean, just kid wants to play baseball and loves it, so it's like fine. Like this is absolutely going to be a thing we're going to help you do. But so I'm doing the facility tour for these parents, and we get back to the launch pad in the R&D cage, and that's typically my big dissertation on the reason we take this approach to skill and technique development is because of the information that we have. Mm-hmm. Again, just like the stark reality of the brutal nature of player development and player ranking. Like the stratification system, it's brutal. It's brutal in its honesty. So she's telling me, so her son started with us on the year 1 of our program, 9Us. Okay. So now the kid's been with us for 2 years. And recently he got together with some of his friends because he still knows these kids, but kids who were on our program at 9 and then left. And now these kids are going into their 11U year next year. And it was great advertising because she's like, the kids got together and they're just like screwing off and playing like sandlot baseball. And you can already see relative to like 10 months of stimulus, the difference between the kids who only had a short period of time in kind of this system that revolves around these paradigms, and then they went in a different direction. And I don't begrudge those parents because I think they're just responding to like what they understand about what is good for their kids. Yep. Like I get it. But then the difference in presentation between those kids that left and her kid that has now had 2 years of our system were stark.
Yep.
And she's telling this to me, but also telling it to a bunch of other parents that are kind of considering being in this program. Yeah. So like, to me, I really think that it's fine that like the ultimate expression of where we want to go is just going to take time.
Yep.
And the great thing about kind of like the system that we're developing here is that as we kind of compound interest, we continue to refine our program. And again, like the big message for moving to year 3 for us is just like competitive application of the idea. I think a lot of that again kind of starts with our coaches. So the reason we've I think that the 2 last episodes we talked about is like the need for really good coaches, but then coaches and systems, and like this idea of art and science. We're in I think a much improved place moving into year 3 to have people that are able to kind of be in both worlds. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I don't even want to say that it's both worlds, right? It's our world, which is skill and technique.
Yep.
Right. It is muddying the water about what is a game, because everything's a game. Everything's a competition. If we want more engaged kids, the simple hack there is just to give them a scoreboard.
Yeah.
The scoreboard is the biggest hack to like driving engagement, because they understand that there's some sort of consequence. And then the only thing that just kind of is necessary on the back end of things is, again, just like applaud the kids that win, because that's great, but also make sure that those kids on the other side of the equation understand that they're developing on their own path too. Right. And just like, which is very different than that coach who goes, I measure one thing and it is the win-loss record of my team, and all of you serve that need.
Right.
And I will prostitute out developmental opportunities for you, because that shit isn't on a column that I'm looking at. Right. My stuff is just this column. Yep. Right. Like,
and for me, I'm a firm believer, and like I will never give a shit about winning and losing. I really won't. Where I start giving a shit is being competitive and not being competitive.
Yep.
Because kids have to enjoy playing baseball to continue playing, and they're not going to enjoy it if they're getting their teeth kicked in. But the other part of that, and this is like, I've had some of those boys on my team because they know how much I hate bunting, ask me, okay, so like, what do I do if my high school coach asks me to bunt? You do it.
Yeah.
You do it. And they're like, well, but like you saying bunting's bad. It's like, I say bunting's bad because I trust you to be able to go out and make the play that you need to make, and know where you runner on second. I'm not going to have you bunt him over the third, but I trust that I want you to hit the ball to the right side so that you can move that runner from second to third. And maybe that gets into the outfield and the guy scores. Yep. That's why I'm not having you bunt, is because I trust you to be able to make that. And like, your high school coach doesn't trust you yet.
Yeah.
So like, a great way to get him to trust you less is to pretend you missed the sign, which, yes, I have in my past recommended kids say. But that's a great way to like put your ass on the bench and never get off.
100%.
And that is like my message to them is like, I am not telling you to do that because I trust you, because I know the development situation you've been put in.
Yeah.
They don't. You have to prove yourself to them.
Yep.
And like, that's a life thing, right? Like, you gotta, in most situations that you find yourself, especially new situations, you're not going to immediately have the trust of your peers. You have to prove yourself before you like have their trust. And sometimes like proving yourself means doing things that like you don't want to do, or like might not be the best for your specific development. But to me, that's what it's about, is like, I think a lot of kids, because the signal is so strong for winning and losing, when they lose games, they lose trust in their abilities.
Yep.
And they lose trust in the training environment to teach those abilities simply because they lost the game.
Yep.
Now, if they're losing 19-0 to a team that is not that much better than them, like, there's probably something to be said for like, you should maybe not trust your abilities, or like, we're putting you in a bad training situation. But if you're going out there and you're competing your butts off, and like, you don't win a tournament because at some point in every tournament, maybe you made it to bracket play, the top bracket, and you ran into a team that had biological outliers and was just better than you, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to lose. That losing isn't the problem. It's not competing that's the problem, because that's when you start to lose trust in yourself, in your skills, and your abilities. And I was the Untold on Netflix, like the sports stories. The new one is the Manti Te'o documentary. I was in college when that happened. So like, I remember how big of a deal that was. And like, he was like my age. So it was like, what is this dude? Like, he had a girlfriend for 3 years that he had never met. Like, what are we doing? But the end of the second episode of the documentary was like really fascinating to me, because he talks about the anxiety he went through the first few years of his NFL career, because it got completely derailed. He never ended up being a player as great as people thought he would be. But to hear him tell it was because from that situation, he grew up just absolutely having full confidence in himself, trusting his instincts, trusting his ability, and he lost the trust in his instincts when he got fooled. And then that carried over to the football field.
Yeah.
Where he no longer has, and he literally said it in the doc, I'm going up to the play is starting, I'm walking up to the line of scrimmage thinking, don't miss the tackle.
Right.
That is never a thought that guy had any point in his life until he lost trust and confidence in his own abilities. And that is what happens when like you lose by a lot and like you're not competitive, is you just start losing trust in yourself and your teammates and your abilities and your situation. And that's when kids like quit baseball because it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
So like being able to make sure that who cares if they win or lose, but make sure you're going out there and you're competing until the very last out, because you have to trust in your abilities that you're still going to be competitive no matter what the score is.
Yeah. And like, and again, relative to where we are in youth baseball, I think it's a very different thing. A system that recognizes where the players are for that at like 11 and 12 versus 15.
Yeah.
And again, the idea and application is being cognizant of the fact that like if I tell a kid that I don't fundamentally believe in them at a very young age, it's different than saying to a 15-year-old, I don't trust you yet, so I'm going to bunt you in this situation, right? I think a 15-year-old, again, they're a little bit more resilient just relative to like emotional maturity and cognitive development to kind of weather that storm. The 14, 13, 12, and certainly everybody younger than that is much more, that stuff's going to stick, like it's just going to stick. So like, the idea for us, I think, is just like it's competing on our terms. It's like it's competing on our terms relative to the things that matter to us. And again, just like the fidelity of the idea of skills at scale, like it's called that for a reason.
And going back to our favorite quote that we might get tattooed here.
We might. We've talked about it.
We have had this discussion. Is hard work gives you honesty.
Yep.
And you need to trust that you're putting in the hard work and you're going to get the honesty of the results, but you just got to stay on the path. And like when you lose trust in that, that's when you quit baseball. That's when you no longer enjoy playing the game, is when you like lose trust in your ability to play and compete, and the ability of your like coaches and authority figures to put you in a situation where you feel like you can go out and compete.
And how permeable is that idea if you receive it in baseball to other aspects of your life?
Right. 100%. Yeah.
Like, cause that's the thing. I mean, I have real significant concerns about the deliverable to the athlete in youth sport.
Mm-hmm.
Is it empowering you to take this hard work gives you honesty approach to your life? Because like, look, again, the overwhelming majority of these kids aren't going to get a chance to ask that question about themselves in college baseball, much less professional.
Right.
What they do have the ability is to ask that question of themselves in their adult life. Mm-hmm. And all I think what we're advocating for is that, again, if you just understand the ecosystem and how unlikely it is that the majority of these kids are going to check that box because it's so fucking hard, then what can I deliver to them? Well, what I can deliver to them in a sense is just like, look, if you have an honest assessment of the work and thoroughness and dedication you put into something, it's either going to go the way that you wanted or it doesn't, but you know that you did everything you could.
Right.
That is the only thing that I want these kids to understand, because like, man, it terrifies me that my son wants to play professional baseball. It's fucking terrifying, because I fear everything I know about how difficult that is and how much that stuff revolves around things that I, as his father, who has a biological imperative to protect him and nurture him and teach him and mold him and keep him safe and love the shit out of him. There's a bunch of stuff I can't control out there for that goal.
Yeah, and you're going to have to watch him fail a bunch.
Yes.
And figure it out.
But the thing that, the thing that as a parent and also an administrator, like in our program, that works me through there is just like, look, I can accept having like hands off of the outcome, because I understand that what he's receiving here is not solely validated by whether he plays college baseball or not.
Yep.
Right. It's just, we're just talking about life stuff. Mm-hmm. We're really talking about life stuff, and which again comes all the way back to competition. Right? Like that's the same thing. If you go into, some a bidding contest about some sort of like interurban architectural design process, and you bust your ass and you do the best job of doing the workup for that strip mall, Target, Wendy's, Big Bath, Bed Bath and Beyond, whatever, and you lose, but you did everything you could, it's like, okay, I'm okay. I did what I could. I just want kids to understand that. And what I don't want to do along the way is stigmatize them and pigeonhole them and go like, you can't. I'm not even going to give you the opportunity to learn. Because at the end of the day, you just compete, like that's life.
That's life, right? Life is very often an individual game played in a team setting.
Oh boy.
And like that includes a lot of failure that you have along with that. And like, look, I'm someone who I'm sitting down, so you can't tell. I could be standing up, you don't know. But I'm not genetically gifted. So like there just wasn't a point in my life where I ever thought it was possible that I was going to play professional baseball. I was never. Yeah. I had the reality from a fairly young age, and then I went and worked in professional baseball, and without question, every time someone finds out you work in professional baseball, they just jump to the assumption that you played at a high level.
Sure.
Which sometimes I let them go along with that assumption. Sometimes I like will correct them and say like, no, it was just like I had this goal from a young age and nobody told me that was dumb.
Yeah.
Nobody told me I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I just trusted myself and kept pushing. And like, if someone had told me when I was 13 or 12 that it was a dumb idea and that I shouldn't do this, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. And that's the same thing I'm trying to do with these kids. Yep. Is like, I am never going to tell them that their goal in baseball is dumb. I'm going to say, all right, let's get you on a path to do it.
Yeah.
Here are the goals that you need to hit, and we'll give you benchmarks along the way. And like, all I can do for you is put you in the right situation and guarantee you that you work hard, and we'll figure it out whether you can or you can't. And like, that is such an important life goal to learn, is that like, you are not going to. Sometimes life is an individual game played in a team setting. Sometimes your boss is going to ask you to bunt.
Yeah.
And you are not going to want to bunt, and you just have to do it.
Yep.
Because that's life sometimes. And like, you could be the cleanup hitter, and like sometimes you're bunting.
Yeah.
And like, that's the best like lesson that we can teach these kids, because like, if they aren't going to play in college or play professionally, which the vast majority of these kids aren't, they have to take something out of this experience.
Yep. Yeah, you just got to learn how to compete your ass off.
Learn how to compete your ass off in life, in everything. Like, nothing's ever going to be like given to you. And there's going to be a lot of people that will tell you you can't do it. Yeah. But like, you just can't lose that trust in your own skill and hard work.
Yep. Hard work gives you honesty.
Gives you honesty.
All right. We're going to wrap this thing up because I think I have another meeting.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you guys for joining us as per usual. I have no idea what we're going to talk about next week. It's possible I bring my daughter on here to talk about her journey in baseball and all that fun story, because I think that's kind of the a one of one idea of just like, look, man, you play the game as on your terms, and when you decide you're done, you're done. And,
right.
And my daughter made that choice, and I was proud as heck of her for being able to like to make that decision on her own. So anyways, maybe we'll do that next.
And at some point we got to get our other two Academy staff members here to introduce themselves and say what they do.
Yes, so we'll bring on some new faces. So again, thank you guys as usual for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take it easy.